Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts will take the world by storm.
Yes!
There's some big threat out there, and you're going to help me stop it.
Us?
Why, you got someplace to be?
On May 2nd,
Avengers, you're gone. No one's coming to save the day.
their time
I think we could be the people that are coming.
has come.
Being the hero, there is no higher calling.
Let's do this.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts. Only in theaters May 2nd. Get tickets now. Rated PG-13. Some material may be inappropriate for children under 13.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode 722 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are here. It's Friday, April 18th, 2025. It's a little bit before rush hour. In fact, in DC, it is rush hour. I just drove through it. I'm Donald Wine. I am your host for this episode. Jason is in Tokyo. He is not on this episode, but you will hear some sound from him in a little bit. But I have Scott Rich with me once again. Scott, thanks as always for being here.
Always happy to pinch hit. Always happy to be the sixth man. Insert sports metaphor off the bench here.
Well, I mean, you're in the starting lineup right now. Jason is the one coming off the bench with his.
That's true. We've sent Jason off to Japan. He's off to the minor leagues over there. I've been called up to the big leagues, to the main podcast.
And while he's there, maybe he could do some cruton. Who knows? While he's over there, there's a nice picture that he sent Scott and I of a nice 15-foot tall center named Godzilla. I don't know if Godzilla has any eligibility left, but we will maybe let Jason deal with that. We are here to talk about a couple of things that have happened in the past couple of days. We want to start with the good news. Caleb Foster, number one in your hearts, number one in the scorebook, and will be the number one for Duke next year. He announced on the most recent episode of the Brotherhood podcast that he is coming back to Duke for his junior season, which we are all very, very happy about. Scott, he talked about his dream of leading Duke to a championship, and he basically said that the job's not finished. And so something that he has wanted to do, and we can talk about what this means for his professional aspirations. But as of right now, his aspirations are to lead Duke to a sixth national championship, and he can't do that if he's not at Duke. So he is coming back to try and see that through to reality.
I know that Caleb Foster took some lumps from the Duke fan base this season, some rightfully so. He did not have the season that I think we all expected of him. But regardless of what you thought of how he played this year, you cannot listen to that episode of the Brotherhood podcast and not be so damn excited that he's going to be back for his junior year at Duke. It was so enlightening hearing him talk very candidly. And we got to give Neil Begovich some credit. Neil Begovich, if he ever wants to, do a podcast, if him and Ryan Young start up a Brotherhood alum podcast, we're out of business. He's fantastic at what he does. I'm not sure what his aspirations are, but sports media should be one of them. Regardless, Caleb was very honest in this episode of the Brotherhood podcast. He said that he knew he struggled. He said that, he internally struggled with how he was playing. But what Neil got him to talk about was all of the things that he kept doing behind the scenes when he was struggling. He talked about the preparation for the second UNC game in Chapel Hill. This was the game following his DNP on senior night in Cameron, which we all looked at and said, what the mother F is going on that Caleb Foster didn't play when Spencer Hubbard got 5 minutes and, Stanley Borden got big minutes, right? Neil gets him to talk about how before that game, he was in man's ear all night before, hyping him up, getting him ready. Basically, he stopped himself very smartly, but basically it sounded like he was trying to get man in the mindset of these guys can't guard me. I'm going to go out and dominate. He was getting reminding man of his scout for the UNC game in Chapel Hill. Lo and behold, we all know things happen. Caleb Foster gets into that game, and Caleb Foster plays a huge role in Duke winning that game in Chapel Hill. And that was something that came out of left field to all of us. So that story to me just put a smile on my face. And regardless of what his limitations are, regardless of is he a point guard or not, I'm sure we'll probably talk about that for 6 hours on the podcast this summer because we have nothing else to talk about.
Mhm.
That's the type of guy I want in a Duke uniform. I don't care what position he's playing next year, in John Shire's lineup. The last thing I'll say before getting off my monologue is this. We know from last season that John Shire is not afraid to have hard conversations with his players. If John Shire doesn't think that a certain player is going to be ready for a certain role, he's going to tell him. We know that something along those lines happened with a lot of players that left the team last summer. The fact that Caleb Foster is on this team and he's already announced that he's back means John Shire believes in Caleb Foster. Means John Shire thinks that Caleb Foster is ready to take that next step and have a big season in his junior year. That's all I need to hear. Because let's be honest, John Shire batted 1,000 with his roster management last season, so he gets a couple free swings before we start questioning him.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said I agree with. That to piggyback off of it, first of all, you mentioned the hard conversations that he's had with players in the past. He didn't have to look far to talk to somebody about it, right? Tyrese Proctor is a similar arc, had a great first season, had a second season that by everyone's expectations, including his own, he was like, that was not up to the standards. And then he came back this year and had a ridiculous year. And I think Caleb Foster sees that and he can see how, coming from the depths of not playing a DMPCD to having a great role, not just in that UNC game, but throughout the postseason. Where I mean, on this pod, I've always said my mantra is stay ready, so you ain't got to get ready and always be ready. There are
I've
two
never heard you
players.
say that before.
Never heard me say it.
Never
I'll
heard
say
you
it
say that
again.
before, Don.
Stay ready, so you ain't got to get ready, and you'll always be ready. The one thing that we heard coming out of that DMP game, a bunch of people were basically assuming that he was gone, right? They were assuming that he was hitting the portal, that something had happened, and people were speculating as if there was a fallout in the team, if there was turmoil,
I said that
all
on
of
this
that.
pod. I brought up Michael Benajay, which happened when I was on campus. I brought that up. I will eat crow. I was one of those guys.
Well, I think at the end, and then again, what, 3 days later, he's carving out a huge role, and everybody's kind of it then further was like, okay, so what happened in that one game? But again, it felt like Caleb Foster was always ready to go. And as you mentioned, and as he kind of explained on the Brotherhood podcast, he knew that his role was at that point to get his teammates ready, to make it where Man knew that he was the baddest MFer on the planet and to play that way and to get those guys ready to play. And I think, first of all, that leadership is going to be vital next year, right? We're losing a lot of guys, but also we're hopefully bringing back some more. And I think that core that John Shire's trying to hold on to for next year, coupled with the freshmen, coupled with a couple, some transfer portal additions, that is going to be the key to, that balance that we kind of had. But at the end of the day, I think Caleb Foster knows he has so much more to give, and I'm glad that he has decided to give it, right? Because he didn't have to. He could have walked away. He could have said, "Hey, I'm gonna, maybe try the professional ranks." He could have tried the portal, but it's clear, and I think he said this last year when him and Tyrese came back, announced they were coming back on the same podcast. He basically said, "I love Duke, and there was no way I was transferring. There was no way I wasn't leaving this family." And that solidified it for me. So the fact that he's coming back again for a junior year and hopefully to take his game to another level and to work on some of the things that he knows that he wasn't great at this year. He has a whole summer to do that, and he has a chance to develop the leadership that he is going to need to basically run this team next year. And everyone should be excited about that.
Important to note that on that episode of the Brotherhood Pod, he made a point of saying, quote, "A few guys will be back with me to set the standard." Few means a lot of things. Typically, I read a few as greater than a couple, greater than two.
Greater than two, yes.
So if that comes to pass, I think we'll all be very happy that, it's been a fairly successful offseason, all things considered. I think that as Duke fans, we're extremely, extremely spoiled. Every Duke fan who has any self-awareness knows that. And we've been very spoiled with in the one and done era of these guys who come in with lofty recruiting rankings and are ready to go from day one, to the point that we have forgotten that that's not the way it always has been. And that's not the way it is for every player. Caleb Foster has had a winding journey. He's, lest we forget, his development was definitely impeded by his injury at the end of his freshman year, which we know carried over into how much he was able to participate, how ready he was to go last summer. So there's every reason to believe that Caleb Foster is just going to take another year to evolve. And sometimes that's what happens. And something we're going to get to see what junior year Caleb Foster looks like. Yeah, that meant we had to ride out a few bumps in the road in freshman year and sophomore year Caleb Foster. But if you want the juniors and seniors, you got to be able to ride out the bumps. You can't have it both ways. And luckily, Caleb Foster has been the type of guy who's threaded that needle where he's contributed, he's played, but he's had those bumps, so he still has that upward trajectory. I think a full, healthy offseason is going to do wonders for this kid. I think that knowing this is potentially, and again, we don't know about everyone's decisions yet, but this is potentially, quote unquote, his team, is going to do wonders for his leadership and his confidence. And we know he's got that dog in him. We saw him hustling his ass off in those games against UNC in the tournament. That's going to be something that when this is his team, when he's the upperclassman, he's now got the opportunity to have that rub off on the rest of his guys. And that's going to be fun to watch.
I mean, look, I think when it comes to him, you mentioned the word spoiled, and I always like to view it as we are lucky, right? We're so lucky in the sense that not just the one and done era, but that we've had this program that is such an establishment, such a theatrical presence that people want to be a part of it, that some of the best players in the country want to be a part of it. Dare I say the best players in the world want to be a part of it. We're lucky that we have better continuity as far as transition from a legendary mythical creature of a coach to a young coach as his direct replacement. How many people can say they had a John Shire type of transition? Very few teams. So we're very lucky in that regard. And we're very lucky in that this team and this program has really evolved as the changing guard has come along, right? This transfer portal has messed up a lot of programs. And somehow we're still a destination for players and for, and teams want to come to Cameron to play us. They know that we're still the golden standard, despite the fact that we weren't the national champions, right? But still people look at us and they want us, they view us as one of the teams that is the team to beat. So I like that. And I think Caleb Foster, not just a parallel with Tyrese Proctor, he now, as you mentioned, in this new leadership role, can offer other parallels to other players, right? For example, Malik Brown, who had a season that was marred by injury, right? He would have, I think we would have gone places, like huge places, if he had a full healthy season. But it's very clear that he's probably
we didn't go huge places. The Final Four isn't a huge place. I know, but
we're trying to get to the top. And
yes, it does. But side note, we have to remember this: we made it to the freaking Final Four. This season was
there.
still.
I remember.
Yeah, you were. That as much as that sucks, like I don't like when we phrase this season as a failure or as less than, because
I don't think it's a failure. Yeah,
I know you don't, but I just want to make sure. I just want to put it out there to the universe, to the people who listen to this podcast, which is much more than me talking to my dog in the corner of the room. Right? This season was not a failure because we didn't win a national championship. This season was not perfect because we didn't win a national championship. This was still a hell of a season that got derailed in the last minute. But same thing could be said for Houston. I don't think a Houston fan would call this a failure, even though they blew that lead in the national championship game. We wanted that final ring, maybe that think it probably does happen if Malik is healthy all year. That's such a big what if. But even without him, goddamn, we had a great season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not using this because I think Malik Brown, again, when I say new heights, like undefeated is what I'm thinking in my mind. Like if we have a healthy season, like the amount of destruction we would have laid on the rest of the college basketball world, in addition to what we already did, right? In his absence, is ridiculous. But the fact is he's going to have to take some time this offseason to recover, whether that's, I mean, I'm not saying he's doing surgery, but there's got to be some sort of recovery for his shoulder. And whether that involves surgery, whether it involves just rehab, whether that involves just him going on vacation for a few weeks and just resting. Caleb Foster has been through that. Caleb Foster knows what it's like to see guys practice and he is not able to because he is not 100% healthy, and what you have to do to get back into that mind frame. He had to go through it this past year. So I think this is something that, again, he can be a leader in that regard. And also, Malik Brown is going to be entering his senior year too, right? He's going to be a leader in that regard. And the two of them, along with a couple others, is an incredible thing to have. And again, we are very lucky that we get to say Caleb Foster is back.
I like
and we're
that.
very, very excited about
Lucky,
that.
Lucky not spoiled. Lucky not spoiled. I like that.
Yeah. And I mentioned at the top that Jason is not on the show, but he did send a little bit. It wasn't a little bit. It was a lot of it. A nice little monologue on Caleb Foster coming back. We want to play that sound for him live from Tokyo. Here's Jason Evans.
Hey, Donald, and whoever you have standing next to you podcasting right now in my place, probably Scott. I hope you guys are having a good time. We've gotten some really, really good news for next year with the news that Caleb Foster is coming back. I'm super excited for this, even though he's a guy who had there's no other way to say it than he had a rough sophomore season. I mean, who can forget, did not play coach's decision, DNP-CD, in the final regular season game against Wake Forest, and you had to think that there was very, very little chance that this was a guy who would be returning to Duke. But he played considerably better in the ACC tournament. I remember there was at least one game where he was just outstanding, and then he had some really, really nice moments in the NCAA tournament as well, and now he's decided to return. I think we cannot underrate what a healthy offseason may mean for Caleb Foster. Folks forget that he was recovering from some surgery last year and didn't get a full offseason to work on his game, to work with his teammates and develop into the player that he could become. And this is a dude who is an immensely talented scorer who can kill you quickly. I mean, we saw numerous games this year where, like, Caleb would come in and play like 6 minutes and score 10 points. He's a guy who knows how to score, and I think that he's going to spend this offseason really, really working more on running the team and moving the ball around and making sure that he's a better sharer, so to speak, and that he's not a ball stopper, which I think was a primary reason why Sion James replaced him as point guard last year. I also think he's going to be a real mentor to Caden Boozer. Caleb now becomes the longest tenured Dookie on the team. I'm trying to think if there are any of the walk-ons. No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think the Stanley Bordens and Spencer Hubbards are all gone as well. So he is the longest tenured Dookie on the team. That is a really, really important role. And don't underestimate the importance of a guy who can teach you about the ACC, handling the pressure of being a Dookie. I've always sensed that Caleb is more of a talker, more of a vocal leader than Tyrese Proctor was. I mean, Tyrese was a two-time cap. Well, I'm not even sure they named him. I'm trying to remember now. I'm in a Japan haze as I look out at the Tokyo skyline. Maybe I'm forgetting. I don't think that we formally named captains this past year. But in any event, Tyrese Proctor was a captain, but I never sensed that Tyrese was the vocal, I'm going to call all you guys together and tell you what you need to do kind of leader. There's nothing wrong with that. That just wasn't in his nature. I think Caleb Foster is more of that kind of guy. And I think that's a big role that he can play for this Duke team this coming year. I also want to say about his game that I think that maybe his NBA dream has begun to fade a little bit. A guy who came to Duke hoping and expecting that his tenure in college would be fairly quick and that he would then move on to the pros. I mean, that's what his high school ranking sort of says to you. And I think that Caleb maybe is accepting the reality that may not be exactly where his game goes. Not saying it's impossible, not at all. And if he has a big season, I'm sure the NBA will be very excited for him. But if that is the case, I think one of the reasons Caleb Foster came back is that he recognized that he has a good rapport with this Duke coaching staff, and it may be that a coaching career is where he eventually finds his way. And spending 3 or 4 years, maybe 4, 3 or 4 years in a program, learning from one of the better coaching minds and the better younger coaching minds in the game, that's probably a good thing for his coaching career long term. So I love that he made this decision. And the last thing I wanted to mention, the Brotherhood podcast lives on. So glad we're going to have CFos back for another year of talking to the players, and I can't wait to find out about Nick Hamenia and Shelton Henderson's favorite protein and favorite pro team. God, that is just a moment that lives in infamy. So anyway, congrats to CFos on making a great decision, and I'm super excited to have him back. And I think this is the first of several. I think we're going to get at least 3 more Dukies saying that they are coming back and returning, and that'll be a nice returning core for this team to mix with the freshmen. And I kind of feel like there's probably going to be probably just one portal guy involved in this team as well. Anyway, signing off from Tokyo, this is Jason. Back to you guys.
So thank you, Jason, as always, for being on the show. I say that like he's a guest here, but
I'm slowly stealing the podcast from Jason. I hope you all don't mind.
Yeah,
JK, LOL.
We've told Jason that he needs to get better. He needs to recruit Godzilla, and if he doesn't, then maybe we get Scott in the transfer portal. Who knows? But I think his points are great too, right? When we talk about the fact that Caleb Foster has to work on some things, and I think the idea that he can be in a different role next year, maybe one where he's more off the ball at times, right? I think there's going to be some opportunity for him and Caden Boozer to share the floor, with him kind of moving to that off guard position where he doesn't have to have that responsibility, similar to what Tyrese Proctor did this year. But there's going to be times where he has the ball in his hand and he's going to be the guy who initiates the offense. And can he become more of a player and evolve his passing, evolve his ability to create through the pass, or at least initiate the offense via the pass? I think that is something that I think he would say he would want to work on, but I'm really looking forward to that development over the summer.
Yeah, even on his announcement, he mentioned he has aspirations to play in the NBA. His clearest path to being in the NBA is being a point guard. And you don't need to be a traditional quote-unquote point guard to make it in the NBA nowadays, but you need to be able to initiate the offense. You need to be able to create for others, which is something that Caleb has to work on. I think that he's going to improve on that. I think it was very telling that in the tournament, when he was magically resurrected and became Duke's sixth man, when he was on the floor, he was playing the point. Most of the time when he was on the floor, he was in for Sion, and he was bringing the ball up, not Tyrese Proctor. That was pretty notable. So again, John still, even despite his struggles this season, had faith in him with the ball in his hands. That'll improve. His decision making will improve with a full year or full off season, being healthy. I think the Caden Boozer question is going to be, the turning point for this roster. I think how John views Caden's ability to impact next year's team, and whether he views that as the third guard, coming off the bench, or whether he views that as starting alongside of Caleb Foster. That we're going to get a lot of insight into how John views that based off of what happens with other decisions, with transfer portals, with things over the next few weeks. Mm-hmm. And that is called a transition. Jason, I'm coming for your job.
I think to put a point on it too. I think when you think about Caleb Foster and Caden Boozer, it's an interesting combination because yes, they can be on the court at the same time, but as a duo, right? If you consider the point guard one spot, they have different qualities, right? That they are good at, right? Caleb Foster is better shooter than Caden Boozer is expected to be. Caden Boozer, a better passer than Caleb Foster is. The defense is similar, right? So how those guys play off each other, especially when they're practicing against each other, they're going to be able to get each other better in those areas that they're more deficient in than the other. And that would create a one spot that would be hopefully dynamic no matter who's on the floor, or again, if they're sharing it together and both of them have the opportunity to bring the ball up at the same time. Anything else before we take a break here?
I think we've talked about the good. I think it's time that we have to unfortunately talk about some of the sad news.
Do we really? Yes, we do. This is the DBR podcast. We talk about it all over here. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, decommitment. We're going to talk about Shelton Henderson's departure after this.
Hey, Duke fans, make this your best season yet with a nutritious 2-minute meal from Factor. Eating well has never been this easy. Just heat up and enjoy, giving you more time to do what you want.
Jason, the meals are terrific too, and they arrive fresh and ready to eat, which gives you more time to get outside and enjoy this lovely spring weather that we're having. They have 45 weekly menu options, so you can pick gourmet meals that fit your goals, whether it's satisfying breakfasts, on-the-go lunches, or premium dinners. And I enjoy the fact that they're filling, and I don't feel the need to snack between meals.
Yeah, that's always good for your waistline. Get started, everybody, at factormeals.com/DukeBB50off. Use that code DukeBB50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Again, that is code DukeBB50off at factormeals.com for 50% off plus free shipping.
All right, we are back, and we shift our attention to the things that we didn't want to talk about today, and that news being that Shelton Henderson, who is number 30 in the ESPN 100, it was one of the class of 2025 that was supposed to be coming into Duke this summer, has decided to decommit from Duke University. It was announced late last night, late Thursday night, I want to say. Duke, I guess, released him from his national letter of intent, and he has now reopened his recruitment. Is expected to not come to Duke University. He chose Duke initially over Texas, Louisville, Houston, LSU, and Texas Tech. But obviously there's a lot of speculation out there. We'll get into that in just a second. But first, Scott, your thoughts on Shelton Henderson's decommitment. And it was kind of a surprise. Some people may say it wasn't a surprise. And others, I think I'm in the boat of this could mean something else is about to happen.
I am of the mindset that this is the move before the move. This is, and we've seen this before within John Shire off seasons where there's something that looks bad, but then there's the other piece of news that's going to drop. And I keep looking down at my phone because I know we're recording now, so we're probably going to jinx it into existence that news is going to drop the second that we finish up recording. But when I look at Shelton Henderson, I see a guy who, by all recruiting accounts, is a athletic specimen, is a defensive stopper, but is very raw offensively. I think he shot some less than 25% from three during his, I forget if it was the EYBL or high school or whatever those numbers were from, but his shooting was very raw. He was around a 60% free throw shooter as well. To me, that projects as a guy that might have trouble cracking the rotation in year one at a place like Duke, given what we think is returning and given what we may be targeting in the transfer portal. That's a lot of maybes and buts and what's and ifs, but that's where we live right now. But again, we know now more of what John Shire wants. And he wants a team to put a team on the floor that's not only lengthy and defensively stout, but where pretty much everyone can shoot and everyone is a threat from deep. Shelton Henderson doesn't look like he's going to be that in year one. And so if he decided, I want to play in year one, which you have every right to do when you're a borderline 4 or 5-star recruit, it's really hard to go in and take an apprenticeship year, then Duke wasn't the place for him. I think we all wish him the best. If the smoke that he wants to go to Miami to potentially play for Jai Lucas, if that comes to fruition, then good on him. That's good to keep talent in the ACC. We'll want him to play like crap whenever we play Miami. But otherwise, we want those ACC schools to increase. A rising tide raises all boats. So if that comes to pass and the second piece of news drops that hopefully is a much more positive, exciting piece of news, I think this could end up being a win-win situation.
I'm glad you mentioned Miami. Obviously, I went to Miami, and the main assumption in this decommitment is that he is going to follow Jay Lucas to Miami and that Jay Lucas poached him, for lack of a better word. And I want to talk about that for a second because I feel like a lot of people are making a lot of big assumptions here. The one thing that I mentioned at the top is that he chose Duke over Texas, Louisville, Houston, LSU, and Texas Tech. Miami is not one of those teams. Of course, Jay Lucas was the lead recruiter for Shelton Henderson when he was at Duke, obviously before he took the Miami job. The relationship between Jay Lucas and Shelton Henderson predates the relationship between Jay Lucas and Duke. They are both from Texas. They have known each other a long time. This is not something where he only learned of Jay Lucas and got to know him through Duke. It was mainly through their relationship that they already had pre-existing. And I also want to stress this. Shelton Henderson is not declared to go to another school yet. He didn't say I'm backing out of Duke to go to Miami. As a Miami fan, I absolutely would love that because Miami needs all the talent they can get. But it's not a foregone conclusion that he is going there. And no one has been poached yet, and no one should think less of a player that ultimately decides they're better off playing somewhere else, especially before they've arrived. Right? It's one thing if guys that we already had decide to enter the portal, we think of, hey, we wish they would have stayed. This guy, Shelton Henderson never really arrived on campus, so if he decides, hey, this is, based on new factors and variable change, I got to go with my gut and go somewhere else. We've seen a lot of guys recently decommit from the universities they committed to because of changes via the transfer portal. That's going to happen. And as you mentioned, this may be something that the reason why this is happening is because another domino was going to fall, right? In the form of someone coming through the transfer portal, somebody staying that may have tied up a lot of minutes. And if this guy wants to play a lot of minutes, then that's a decision they have to make. But at the end of the day, hi, Mike. Sorry, I was thinking about you when I said that. At the end of the day, this could just mean that Shelton wants to play for Jay Lucas. We see players leave places all the time to follow a coach because that's the guy that they feel believes in them the most. It's not that Jay Lucas has been poaching. If that was the case, I feel like this decommitment would have happened weeks ago.
Yes.
When Jay Lucas took over in the transfer, like as soon as this happened, right, they would have said, okay, Shelton's leaving, he's going to Miami. Done. It's been over a month since Jay Lucas left Duke to take over at Miami. This is not necessarily the case. But I also think if he ends up at Miami, it could just mean he wants to play for Jay Lucas at Miami. These players may be 17, 18, 19 years old, but they are old enough to make adult decisions. And and all of us have made this decision at one point in our life, one job offer over another, one school over another, right? We've had to make these kind of decisions. And yes, when we did it, millions of dollars of NIL was not involved. We wish it would, but that's not how it worked back then. So I think it also, to sum it up, we can't get every top recruit, every top portal player, and keep everyone on our roster and everyone be happy. It's not practical. We would love that in an ideal world, but that's just not how it's going to work. And we have to approach roster construction in that way. But it also means that when someone decides, hey, based on what you're doing, I need to do something else, that is not an indictment on Duke, and it is not an indictment on that player. Because that, at the end of the day, something has changed. We don't know what it is, but they clearly have enough information to say, you know what, I need to think about this a little bit longer and go in a different direction.
I think this is an Occam's razor situation. I think you put it perfectly. If this was a quote unquote poach situation, this would have happened weeks ago. If the decision was, I want to go to Jay Lucas, regardless of what's happening at Duke, this asking for out of an NLI, there's no reason to wait, right? What makes more sense is that new information came to light. New information came to Shelton Henderson, probably from John Shire, about what he was expecting the roster to look like, and he made a decision accordingly. And if he's looking for a new school and he has a great relationship with Jay Lucas, yeah, he would go to Jay Lucas. That doesn't mean he was poached. And also, again, by all accounts, John Shire and Jay Lucas are tight. I do not think there is any reason there's no evidence to think that bridge is getting burned anytime soon. The last thing I'll say on this is not unusual. This hasn't been happening to Duke all that often, although it did happen a couple years ago with Mackenzie and Bajo. That was a potentially very different situation. We won't open that can of worms. Mm-hmm. But this is happening. And it's happening because of the transfer portal. And it's happening because the roster that coaches recruit players to in the fall is not the roster that they're coming into in the spring because of the transfer portal, because of coaches moving around too. Lest we forget, this is happening all the time. So just like we're getting used to players having more freedom and players moving around, just like we had to get used to, or not as Duke fans, but other institutions had to get used to coaches moving around and what that meant. This is now percolating down to the recruiting level. A NLI isn't the be all and the end all anymore. It's we could, go on and on about what that means for the college game, et cetera, et cetera. But why fight it when that is the reality? And that's something that as Duke fans, we're going to have to get used to, or else we're just going to drive ourselves insane.
Like I said, it happens in every industry. This is the most publicized of it because it's sports, right? It's college athletics, and it happens in NBA rosters, it happens in NHL rosters, it happens in law firms. It happens, and so sometimes, and again, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that John Shire considers Jay Lucas his best friend. He has said it on multiple occasions, and I feel like what might be more plausible is John Shire going, "Hey, you know, we have some stuff come up. We're very excited about having you here, but we want to keep it real with you about what this new role might be for you." Now, having said that, I know you have a relationship with Jay Lucas, and I feel like they have more minutes for you at this position that you want to play or in this role that you want to play. And if you want to consider that, I feel like you should give him a call. But I'm not going to sit here and try and hold you on a promise that we made to you, or not even a promise, but just on information we gave you in the fall when things have changed. I want you to know straight up that things have changed. Here's how we see you. We still would love to have you, but if you think this changes your mind about things, then we wish you well, and we want you to do what's best for you.
And this cycles back to some of the conversations that you guys were having last offseason about, a guy like Jeremy Roach leaving, a guy like Mark Mitchell leaving. I know it doesn't look good from the optics, but I firmly believe that John Shire is doing the right thing by having these frank, honest conversations with his players. By saying, where our team looks different next year, we will love you, but we think your role might change. Are you okay with that? Shelton Henderson, we have opportunities with guys in the portal that I think are going to make our teams better next year, but potentially that means it's going to be a harder uphill fight for you to earn minutes. Are you okay with that? That is so much better than keeping a guy with false promises and having a toxic locker room because a guy thought he had a path to minutes, and all of a sudden at the last minute there's two guys ahead of him in the rotation. You'd much rather have the coach who has those hard, honest conversations with his players that creates that positive locker room environment. And by the way, that is going to pay dividends for Duke down the line. John Shire would lose his reputation. We would start losing battles on the recruiting trail if it was known that he was leading guys along. And we know for a fact at this point that that's not something John Shire is willing to do. And that is going to pay dividends for this Duke program in the long term. And we already know he's the Terminator on the recruiting trail. There's only reason to think that that's going to get more and more successful because he has approached this in a way that I think a lot of other coaches may not have.
Yeah, he gives everybody the promise that you get to come in and compete for time and for your role and whatever that is you want to do. And that's what everyone bought into this year. And again, this has nothing to do with Shelton Henderson and what he may want to buy into, but I always say, give me the information. Let me decide what to do with it, right? In life, give me the information. Let me decide what to do with it. The information was presented, and Shelton Henderson said, "Hey," probably said, "Hey, thanks for all this, but I got to go in a different direction." And John Shire was like, "We understand. We wish you well." There's no bad blood. It feels like between Shelton Henderson and Duke and Shelton Henderson. And no matter where he ends up, Miami or anywhere else, because I feel like a lot of people could be just going off the rails about this, and he may end up somewhere else. And you kind of have to sit there and realize that life is not all about the extremes. Sometimes there's some nuance in this.
Amen.
And sometimes you got to figure out that it's not all, one way or the other way. There are people who live in the middle, and Shelton Henderson could be one of those players. But we wish him well. He will not be a part of the Duke program, but we wish him well. Again, except if the off chance he goes to a school that ends up playing us next season. We will see. But there's a lot more roster news coming. We just are waiting for it to happen. So until then, we're going to end it here. He's Scott. Jason is somewhere in Tokyo, probably having a lot of great food and not bringing us back any. And I'm Donald Wine. Thank you so much for listening. Continue to email us, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We're not going to answer any questions about the portal to ever and all this stuff for every single one of you. There's just too many of you that email. But if there are great questions that are great topic themes, then we'll jump back on here and talk about it because it's the off season. We can do what we want. So until then, again, he's Scott. Jason's LeBron. I'm Donald. And now it's time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.